Hello, my name is Monica Kretschmer, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network, Woman of Inspiration Awards, and this is the Woman Driving Change panel. I'm surrounded by women who are driving change, and today we have three extraordinary women from diverse industries here to share their wisdom with you. Today we have Armineh Keshishian, who is the founder and CEO of Wealth and Wellness Global, Cindy Watson, CEO and founder of Women on Purpose, and Louise H. Reed, who is a founder and Chief Empowerment Officer at LHR, which of course is Louise H. Reed. She is also a leadership development expert and author. So welcome, ladies. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to have you on the panel today. And of course, before we begin, congratulations. I am uber excited. Where are you? Where are you? Aha, I spy with my little eye. I see Louise right here. I'm super proud to be standing beside each and every one of you leaders that is driving change in your own industries. And we had talked before the panel about the wealth of knowledge that is shared. If we could put together the dollars, the years, the time, the experiences, and bundle it together, it is priceless. So thank you for all of that you're going to be sharing with our listeners today. So before we begin, I'll just get you to a little bit of a round table, jump in and just tell our viewers a little bit about you. So Armineh, I'll get you to start us off.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Monica. My name is Armineh Keshishian. I'm from Toronto. I am the founder and CEO of Wealth and Wellness Global, a coaching company that encourages living abundantly. I'm also the author of Wealth and Wellness. Oh, sorry. I'm always into Wealth and Wellness. The author of Joyous Wealth, 56 Secrets to Riches and Wellness. And I am an advocate of women's empowerment and diversity and inclusion. And everything that I do includes all of that.
Beautiful. Welcome, Armineh. Louise?
Monica, thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here. A little bit about me. Quite simply, I like to just perhaps share my mission. And I'm on a mission to elevate women and workplaces, one conversation, one workshop, and one workplace at a time. And so I found it best to do that through starting my own company and doing that through LHR, like you said, LHR Consulting, and that gives me the freedom to perform that mission and to show up in a way that's meaningful for myself as well as my family. Thanks again, Monica, for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Cindy.
You bet. And again, thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do, Monica, helping to empower other women and let us lift each other up, and rising tide lifts all boats. So kudos to you. I'm Cindy Watson. I've been a social justice attorney for over 30 years now. I'm dating myself. And more recently, I created the Art of Feminine Negotiation and Persuasion programs and founded Women on Purpose, because I had a sort of mid-career epiphany that all of life is negotiation, and women tend to either shy away or overcompensate. So I'm really on a mission to help women leverage their natural power to sort of lean into their feminine to actually be able to get more of what they want and deserve in life. So great to be here and humbled to be on the stage with these other powerhouse women.
And I can't tell you how many goosebumps I get when I hear, there's so many women leaders that we have to rely on for resources and for experience and for wisdom. You know, I think we talk about driving change. This is the decade to drive change. And how are we going to do that? It's about the collective wisdom like we're experiencing today. But I want to kind of start a little bit where every woman has a story, you know, and we learn from each of you because you've taken the opportunity to step into the spotlight. But it's not comfortable for most women to do that, to speak on a stage, or, you know, to take that seat or ask for that job or negotiate something for themselves. So why do we as women have such a hard time doing that? Why is it critical? Armineh.
Why is it hard to step up? Normally, I would say that men have healthier self-image. And we do more and we want to be ready, and we are perfectionists before we actually launch anything, because we are looking at every single aspect and from every angle to see if it's a go. And I think that to do something is better than not to do it and wait until it's perfect. And the idea is to have that desire, that burning desire that you want to do something. And that is how we can actually step up. Because unless we have that desire, and if we are kind of thinking, is this going to go? Is this not going to go? No, just have your desire, have your vision, and just forge ahead. That's how I try to do it. And normally it works.
Beautiful. And yourself, Louise?
So I heard a couple questions there, and so maybe building on what Armineh shared. So why don't we step up? I think that's a really big question. And so there's a lot to even unpack there. I think that women have been held to, and still are, held to a different standard. And our yardstick is a different yardstick than perhaps men have measured themselves against. And so as such, I think we're hypercritical of ourselves, of one another, and that creates greater fear, uncertainty, self-judgment. That's not to say that men don't feel those things too, but I think it's just heightened for us. We're under the microscope more. I like to think that if men are walking on a balance beam in terms of how much space they have to make errors, dress how they wish, and various other things, they're walking on a balance beam, we're walking on a tightrope. So we've got a far smaller margin of error. And I feel like in order to overcome that, again, there's lots of answers to that. I think this kind of forum is extremely important. So you're hearing from other women who have felt the fear and have done it anyway, and building a community of really strong people around you, other women who will be that safety net and also be your biggest cheerleaders. So that's how I could talk for days about this, but I'd love to hear from Cindy, so I'll pause there.
Yeah. All right, Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, great segue there, and I agree. This is a subject we could talk for days on. And I guess for me, the thing is, I think it's important for women to give yourself permission and don't beat yourself up if you find it hard to step into it, because you're not alone. You know, we've been so deeply conditioned to not let ourselves make ourselves larger than life, to keep ourselves small. And it starts I was going to say it starts as early as kindergarten, but I think it actually starts in the womb, and it gets passed on through our mother's umbilical cords, generation after generation of women. It's not that long ago, really, when you think of it, Monica, that women didn't have the right to vote. We didn't have the right to own property or credit. Heck, we weren't even recognized as persons in the eyes of the law in some jurisdictions. So, you know, when we talk about making ourselves small, it's perhaps not surprising that we have that tall poppy syndrome. We're afraid to step into the fullness of our power, thinking we're going to get chopped down, because historically, women did get chopped down. You know, in the scheme of our human experience, it's not that long ago women were burned at the stake as witches when they really stepped in their power. So I think there's some very deep conditioning, unconscious gender bias, not just by men against women, but by women against women and women against ourselves, frankly. So don't beat yourself up if you felt shy. There's very good conditioning and historical reasons for that. And now it's the time, we're in the decade of the rise of the feminine, I believe. So just really raise your awareness about some of that conditioning, because knowledge is power. And as soon as we raise our awareness about the conditioning that's held us back, I think it really allows us to take those chances and get outside our comfort zone, you know, take our foot off the psychological emergency brake and be able to sort of reframe that fear to bring us to a place of empowerment. So great question.
So now this next question is going to be, it's a hot one, I'm going to say, Armineh. According to a recent survey, 75, if not more, women experience imposter syndrome. And at some point in their careers, you know, that feeling of self-doubt, you know, when we want to reach, when we want to grow, there's something that kind of says, am I worth it? You know, am I good enough for that? So, you know, I would like to, number one, ask you, Armineh, have you yourself felt, do you know what that feeling is like? And if you have, how have you overcome it?
I have actually felt it at different times, but I never allowed it to overpower me. I come from a family of very empowered women. My grandmother used to have businesses, and she would single-handedly manage everything. And my mother always taught me to be financially independent. So all these things I have grown with. However, I'm Christian born in Middle East, so where women cater to men, generally speaking. And although my mother was working, but the culture is you cater to men. You are just beautiful and you are taken care of, whereas leadership is a different ballgame. And I think as a young child, I wanted to belong where men are. So when I started years ago, I was in the financial industry, which is male-dominated. So somehow within my psyche and my cultural upbringing, I actually stepped aside and kind of walked with men. I think that was very exhilarating because then you get to be the decision maker more often. And there are times, of course, I'm thinking, I can't do this, or I am not capable of this. But if my vision is big and if I want something, I mean, we always undermine our desire, our vision. If we want that vision and if we're willing to go all the way, then there is no stopping. Challenges, of course, they're going to happen. Challenges are always there for every worthy cause. But the idea is to step over them or on top of them, of the challenges, and just make it happen. And that's how all leaders work. It's not really based on if you're a female or a male. Leaders have to go through all the challenges. And as we discussed earlier, it was talked through the panel, men also feel that sometimes they're not enough. I think as human beings, we have fear of criticism, fear of judgment, and it's just human nature to feel that. But we overcome by taking action. And I always say by taking inspired action, where you're ignited, your soul, your spirit is ignited, and you're excited. And when you're excited, then you're actually able to have a community who supports you and comes with you. And it becomes a bigger phenomenon on its own, and it becomes the purpose, as Cindy was talking about.
Beautiful. I like what you said, Armineh, about just normalizing it, right? I mean, imposter syndrome, we kind of think that we're all in this own little world, that nobody's feeling what we're feeling. But the reality is that we're not alone. And, you know, it's almost like that's a normal feeling when you're growing. So anyways, thank you for that, Armineh. Louise.
Imposter syndrome. Wow. Yes, is the short answer. Have I felt it? How often? Probably the first 40 years of my life. And the hard thing upon reflection now at 46 was that I don't even think I knew it was a thing then. And for me, it really was a moment where it felt like I ran into, you know, that proverbial brick wall where certain few life events all conspired at the same time. One of them being the death of my only mentor and just a wonderful human being who died of complications following a bone marrow transplant, which was the same thing that had saved my sister's life 15 years prior. So there was a lot in that. And so in that moment, that was the brick wall. And in that moment, I decided that the way I was living isn't how I wanted to continue to live. How is this related to imposter syndrome? Because through that period of deep exploration, I came face to face with imposter syndrome. I was like, oh, hello there. And then realized how she was riding sidecar with me my whole life. And really, she'd probably been in the driver's seat. And so it was really that point on, we talked about awareness already. It was really from that point on that at least I recognized her there. Have I always been allowed? Have I always been in the driver's seat, or has she? We've flip-flopped. But I like to think that as time has gone on, as I've created a greater community of strong women, as I've developed my mindset further, as I've got myself a coach, as I've done a lot of work and continue to do the work, that I feel I use the fear as fuel more often than not now. So she's there. She'll always be there. but I recognize her now, and I've got some tools to better navigate that kind of inner conversation.
I kind of like the idea of naming her and go, you know what?
She's called Sally.
Sally, you're not going to get to me today, Sally. Right? I think that's brilliant.
Name it.
So I'm driving today. You take the back seat. I got this covered. Right? That's so empowering. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Cindy, how about yourself?
Yeah, I love these answers so far. Both of you are fantastic. And I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome. I've heard a number of people say, oh, no, I don't. I've been lucky. I've never experienced it. I'm not sure I believe that. I think everybody has imposter syndrome, at least at some point in life. And definitely, as much as I always exuded confidence, I mean, definitely she was knocking at the door often. And in particular, at the start of the law career, it was very much a sink or swim kind of environment. And I remember I was thrown in my first job as a lawyer to go argue a pretty high profile case, and I'd never actually even been to a hearing yet, let alone conduct one. So she was knocking pretty hard that day, and it was just a matter of, getting yourself really grounded, showing up and doing that fake it until you become it, right? I mean, I showed up exuding confidence. I sat, made a point of taking everything in, trying to get the feel for it, waited to make those contributions for the opportunity when I really felt I had something. And I'm a big believer in that confidence-competence loop. And that's why I'm such an advocate for women getting out of that comfort zone, taking your foot off that psychological emergency brake. Because when you take those extra chances, when you're prepared to put yourself out there and you just push that little bit outside your comfort zone, you gain a little bit more competence. And with that competence comes the confidence. And with that confidence, it's like a beautiful infinity spiral ever escalating up, because you get the confidence that gives you more competence. That competence gives you more confidence, and you try more things, and so on as you go out. So that I think recognizing we all suffer from imposter syndrome, and always just pushing yourself outside that comfort zone so that you just keep getting that competence, which increases your confidence, I think is key.
Beautiful. So according to a survey, another survey, 67% of women learn from other women, just like I'm learning from all of you. I don't go a day without learning. It's fantastic. But what is the most valuable leadership lesson that you have learned from in your career, Armineh, from another female?
Most of my coaches have been men, actually. And during my career, it was male dominated. I learned from men a lot. It's only the last few years that I'm totally surrounded by women leaders. And what I learned from them is that everybody is going through the same difficulties, trying to manage 50 zillion things. We want this and we want that and we want it perfect. And what I really like in women who are leaders is the ability to multitask and be courageous and just go for it. I mean, those are the two that is very important, I believe, to just go for it and multitask. That's the best way to do it. Otherwise, how are we going to do it?
Beautiful.
I have a short answer. I'd love to hear from the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much, Armineh. How about yourself, Louise?
I think there are two things that come to mind, although I know there are many lessons that I've learned from the amazing women that I've had the luxury of learning from, working alongside. But one of them is apply before you're ready. I'm talking about jobs here. So apply to the job before you think you're ready. Because we all, I think many of us know the statistics about women often thinking they have to check all of the qualification boxes before they apply. So apply before you're ready, and done is better than perfect.
Beautiful. Another short answer, but they don't need to be long sometimes. It's like done before it's perfect. I think that's a really strong one. I think that we need to be reminded about that, right? More and more. Perfection sometimes is a downward spiral, right? So great one to check. Cindy, how about yourself?
Yeah, I love these questions are fantastic and important, I think. The greatest lesson I learned, I would say, is trusting to be yourself. I think we are so condemned, and I was guilty of it at the beginning of my law career. I fully confess that I bought into that myth that it was a man's world, and it was totally male dominated, no question. You know, surrounded by men, often the only woman in the room. But when you buy into that myth, you end up showing up in a way that's not authentic to you. And then the world gets out of balance, and we get out of balance because we stifle those feminine traits that are actually our greatest strength, bringing that sort of much more masculine competitive model to the table. It's not authentic, it doesn't serve us, and it doesn't serve the world. I think it's one of the reasons the world's in such chaos right now. So for me, one of the greatest lessons was really being able to lean into those feminine strengths, own them, and celebrate them and bring those to the forefront and recognize them as our greatest leverage. And I love when you see leaders like, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda, she's doing that. She leans into that feminine, not shy to say that kindness is their national language. You would not have seen that 20 years ago from a global leader. So I think that's a gorgeous lesson to be able to really own and embrace.
So you're all so very strong, confident leaders now, but what was that turning point, if you can remember that turning point, that you really stepped into using your voice and started to making an impact as a leader? Do you remember that turning point, Armineh? What was that?
I'm going to think about that for a minute. I would like to have someone else to start this time, if you don't mind.
Sure. Louise, jump in.
It goes back to my mentor, Julia, the one that I mentioned in my a couple of questions or answers ago. And it was in the moment, it was a month after her passing that I chose to leave working in a full-time corporate job and start my own business. And that was scary, of course. And it was in that time that I recognized that I was worthy of standing up for me, because here the light had been just extinguished. She was 36 years old. This light had been extinguished from this marvelous, magnetic woman who was really making a difference in this world. And I felt it as, I felt like this sounds really sort of cheesy or cliche, but I felt like I needed to carry on the work and carry on to be a light in the world that she was no longer able to continue to bring forth to others. And so that was where I made a decision that my voice was worth finding and sharing and living. So, but that too is a journey of discovering and really building confidence around. But that continues to be a turning point for many parts of my life's journey.
Beautiful. Cindy, how about yourself? What was that?
Yeah, wow, that was beautiful. I would say I have two sort of distinct turning points that I remember with real clarity. And I think one is when I was really quite young. And I remember going from grade 6 to grade 7. I don't know if you guys had that, but we had to move to a middle school. And I grew up in a low rental apartment on what we called the wrong side of the creek. And when I went to grade 7 and 8, suddenly I was introduced to people from the other side of the creek, from a much more affluent area. And at first, and I didn't get it, but a lot of my new friends that I was meeting weren't allowed to come back to my place, right? I was going to say come to play. I was a little old for that, but they weren't allowed to come back to our apartment complex. We lived in this low rental apartment complex. And I didn't clue in until I saw the look on my dad's face when I had mentioned that people weren't allowed to come over. And in that instant, there was just like this profound shift, because my dad was one of these, larger than life, hardworking factory guy. And there was this flicker in that moment of him thinking, oh my gosh, what if my kids are held back because of my station in life? And it just, from that moment, I remember being very intentional about wanting to advocate for change and fight against injustices in the world and protect, sort of the underdog, if you will, and protect against discrimination based on any number of heads, class being one of them, but certainly gender or race. And so it's not a surprise, I guess, I became a social justice attorney. That passion burned bright for a very long time. And then later, I would say my second epiphany came because, as I mentioned, I bought into that myth about it being a man's world, and I saw success as being based on that toughness and that competitive model. But later, I was having a conversation with my middle son. We had 3 kids in 3 years, started late, made up for lost time. And And I had noticed already that I was bringing that sort of barracuda mode, if you will, to my professional relationships, and then it kind of leaks into your personal relationships and ultimately your sense of self. And I was having this conversation with Chase, my son, and he was getting agitated, and I thought we were just having a conversation. All of a sudden, at one point, he's like, "For God's sake, Mom, does every conversation have to be an argument that you win?" And it was like someone just sucked the wind right out of me and held a mirror up, and I'm like, wow. I did not like what I saw, and it really inspired me to drive change from a strong place of feminine power and energy. So I'd say for me, that was a real turning point and an impetus for starting Women on Purpose and creating the Persuasion and Art of Feminine Negotiation programs, digging in and recognizing you don't have to be a barracuda. You actually can get better outcomes and better relationships when you show up leaning into your feminine power. So those are two shifts that I can remember to want to drive change.
Wonderful. I love the male influence. It can either, strengthen or detract from, a positive outcome or a non-positive outcome. But I really, truly believe that everyone does play a role to support her. And I do believe that men play a critical role and really breaking that. It's not a glass ceiling. It's a brick ceiling. And it is still very much so. So Armineh, I'm going to go back because I'm going in my sequence here, and I don't think I got your answer because we started with Louise. So I'm going to rewind. Yeah. My apologies. I'm going to get you to answer this first question, but you know what my next one is.
The way I have run my life, actually, it's bit by bit. And I don't recall a specific moment that I have changed. It's just moment after the moment and after moment. But I did come to Canada as a teenager with my younger sister. We were homesick. Our family wasn't here. We didn't have any friends. We didn't know anyone. We couldn't speak English, actually. And before I came here, I wanted to come to North America, an English-speaking country, Canada or US, and I chose Canada. And so that was definitely a point where I thought a lot could happen to the better and to the positive. And the second thing is, which has nothing to do with my wealth and wellness coaching program. I'm an executive and artistic director of Evolution Dance Theater. So I danced at some point, and as a Middle Eastern girl, dancing in public is a taboo. And that is when I chose to dance in public, which actually, it was excellent because then we started doing all our productions. That was the moment when I said, no culture or society can dictate what I can or cannot do. So I don't take on men one-on-one. I just take the whole culture or the society. Because when I start going, there is no stopping. And those are the two, if I have to pinpoint, those are the two that I can say was very important in my life, those two times.
Beautiful. Well, I'm certainly glad, and my apologies for almost kind of skimming past that. I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to hear your answer. So let's now skip to the male allyship. How important is it to have that support from our champions in order to break the brick ceiling? Armineh, I'll just get you to start us off.
It's absolutely important to have men as allies because the world is male and female, masculine, feminine. We cannot run the world without men. It's just not possible. I mean, we can. The saying is that if women run the world, we would have a better world. That's a different discussion. Men are necessary because we are married to them. They're our brothers, fathers, grandfathers, our sons. And if we alienate them, what are we teaching them? But when we bring them to discussion and say, we need your emotional support and sometimes financial support, then it's all inclusive. I don't like to, although we always talk about, including myself, women empowerment, we always need to include the men and have male-female balance. Otherwise, to me, it's not balanced.
Awesome. Thank you. How about yourself, Louise?
Oh, gosh. Yes to what Armineh shared. And I think about the yin and the yang. It's the opposing and sometimes, opposite forces, yet together, it's really what makes a whole. And so, both in our personal lives, as Armineh shared, they are a rich part of our life. They too are a rich part of the fabric of our society and our businesses. But in terms of allyship and creating greater equity, they can keep the foot on our neck, so they can, take their feet off and help bring us up. And really, I think the whole essence behind if women ruled the world would have I can't remember the quote now. It seemed really clear in my head before I started to say it. But would be a better world. I think that's partly true, because what we are looking for generally is greater collaboration, connection, community, and equity. And so in order for us to get there, we need half of the world's population to hold hands with us and create something new together. We can't get there alone.
And from a mom of a boy, I worry about our boys. I worry that they know that their voice is valued and their contribution, to women and to building the society is really important as well, right? Everybody wants to feel valued, right? And I think that men are no exception, and they do play such an important role. So thank you very much, Louise. Yeah. Cindy, how about yourself?
Yeah, I love and totally agree with all of the answers so far. And like you, Monica, as a mom of 2 boys and 1 daughter, that's a big concern for me as well. And so I'll take a slightly different angle, I guess, answering, because you guys have covered it so beautifully, that piece of it. For me, one of the reasons I feel so passionately about reframing sort of negotiation and showing up with this art of feminine negotiation, I use the word feminine intentionally, but it's not just for women. I mean, we all have, I think it was Armineh who said masculine and feminine energy and I think Louise said about the yin yang. And so for me, when both men and women embrace their feminine, that we've all stifled for too long, seeing it as being counterintuitive to success, when we start to embrace that as our greatest strengths, and recognize them as leadership qualities, I think we raise the bar for everyone. When we raise the value of the feminine for both men and women, when we bring that compassion and trust building and rapport building and empathy to the table, when we're able to do that across the gender divide, having those male allies and empowering other women, I think in doing that, we elevate everyone.
Beautiful. And I think that, this is the decade for women to drive change, but we have a lot to do with how that happens, right? And we're in control of bringing the men to the table in order to amplify them to slingshot us even more forward. So we're strategic, right? We can be strategic in that, right? So that's really lovely. Now, I want to talk about something, that's really near and dear to a lot of our hearts, and that's about that work-life balance, right? Of course, coming out of COVID, we were all tested. Like, there's no bigger test than COVID and the effects that it's had on our mental health and wellness, but also our, that, how would you say, 18-hour days, 7 days a week, really being able to turn off. So let's dive in a little bit about that, because I'm going to share a quote with you. Don't confuse having a career with having a life. Mm. Does that resonate with anyone at this time?
Yes.
So do you really think you can have it all, Cindy?
Well, I mean, I love that question, actually, and I see people resisting on this. It comes up all the time. And I think it's a matter of perspective. I love that quote. Because I think we have been so conditioned, again, to see that success based on your money, on power over people. I think when we're able to show up with that different approach, when we choose joy, when we choose an abundance mindset, when we choose optimism, when we choose collaboration over competition, then I do think we can have it all. When we're able to find that gorgeous balance. And then that's not to say this is a piece of cake. I mean, I'm not going to be all looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, but I do believe when we can't control a lot of what happens, but we can choose to control how we show up. And I think when we choose to show up from that place of collaboration and compassion for others, truly seeking to understand and meet the needs of others, I think it changes how we show up, because then we're more likely to be able to find do what we love and love what we do, and be able to show up consistently from a natural, authentic place of power, both in our home and, in our personal and professional lives. My tagline is how to get what you want from the boardroom to the bedroom. So I do believe that you can elevate your persuasive and influence abilities both in your personal and on your professional front when you get really intentional about it. So yes, I love that quote, and yes, I think it's possible.
Beautiful. And Armineh, I think I started with you, Sydney, so sorry about mixing up all the schedule here. Armineh.
That's okay. I think I like to start with two concepts that I normally teach and I share with everyone. Number one is my 3D concept, which is desire, determination, and dedication. So you've got to know what you want. You have to be totally in love with the idea of whatever it is that you want. And it's 100%. That's absolutely what you want. And then you make a decision. Maybe not today. You say, okay, next year I'm going to do it. You decide to do it. And number three, you're committed. You're dedicated. No matter what, challenges will happen, will come. But so there's the 3Ds. And then I normally don't like to use the word balance, because if we follow our heart and our vision, then there is no sacrifice, there is no balance. And then we have the 4 cornerstone philosophy, which is physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual. And I do it for myself, and I help others to discover for themselves. In each area, you decide what you want. In North America, most of us are focused on the physical, which is a gorgeous body, a fit body, shelter, beautiful, millions of dollars, a house that is millions of dollars, maybe 2 cars, 3 cars, 10 cars, 2 cottages. It's all physical. Where is the spiritual and emotional well-being? I mean, recently we talk about mental wellness and emotional wellness. But if we have all those in check and go with our desire and determination and dedication, I think that we would live a much more fulfilled and joyous life. And that's what I like to share today.
So you're saying, in a nutshell, that you can have it all as long as you fulfill whatever bucket is that is important to you. And I think that's important, right? It's different for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Louise.
So I'm not sure if this is in contrast to what you're saying, Armineh, or it's just a different way of looking at it. I actually believe quite strongly that you can have it all, but not at the same time. And so if you look at having it all as over the course of your life, then my answer is yes, you can. I was living a life, and I felt, and I still feel like I see a lot of young, high-achieving women early in their career get to, through their 30s, get into their 30s, rock in the career, have the job, have got the kids, and are completely depleted. They've got it all, but yet they've actually not just have a career and confusing a career with a life. They've got all the pieces, yet are completely overwhelmed and unfulfilled. And so it was a friend of mine who said to me when I was feeling that way, she said, you can have it all, Louise, just not at the same time. And to me, that gave me so much freedom to be like, oh my goodness, I've got a whole life to have it all.
Exactly.
I've got a whole life to have it all. And so at that point, I think it's really important to look at what success looks like for you. Like, what does a well-lived life look like? And the founder of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman, who I adore, who I hope to meet someday, he encourages people to ask that question, what does a well-lived life look like? And then in the different seasons of your life, you can then be intentional. I love that word, and Cindy shared that. You can be intentional about where you put your focus and your energy. And as the seasons of your life change, so does your focus and your priorities. And at the end of this beautiful life that we hope we all have, there we can hopefully have had it all.
Beautiful.
That was beautiful. May I add to? Yes. And I totally agree with you, Louise. but what I find is sometimes we want something at a certain time. So it's not necessarily that all we desire is at the same time, as long as you said, in our lifetimes, we have achieved all of that. But emotional well-being has to be along the way. Yes, I agree. So we're not really talking opposites.
And if I can just piggyback, because Louise, when you talked about priorities, it really reinforced for me as well. I think you can have it all when you make a point of taking care of those big rocks every day. You all know that the sort of exercise with the vase, where if you put in the sand and the water, you can fit in all kinds of stuff into a vase. But if you don't start with those big rocks, you're not going to be able to fit it back in. So just every day, make sure to know what your priorities are, the things that are most important, and that you are dedicating time to those every day as well.
Beautiful. And I really am so excited about all of this wealth of knowledge that you're sharing with everyone, because that does give other women permission to use a voice, step into the spotlight and ask for what they want. This is, when the world stopped, women kept going. And I think that we have such a great opportunity. But what I'd like to ask each and every one of you is about that action piece. What are you going to do to drive change, Armineh?
My specialty is wealth and wellness, but let's talk about wealth first. I think that every woman should be financially independent and be financially comfortable at least. A lot of times, women, because of our feminine nature, we become spiritual, social, artistic, and the financial part gets missed out. That is one thing I encourage everyone. And the wellness is that you are the most important person first. If you can't take care of yourself, you might be able to take care of others, but at some point, if you're not well, who's going to take care of you? So emotional well-being and financial well-being, to me, is number one that every woman must think about or consider for herself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Louise?
I'm going to punt this to Cindy.
Okay. Sure, I'll jump in. I think opportunities abound when you're open to see the possible gifts in adversity. So, and I think COVID, as you've said, is a beautiful example of that. People paused. They took stock of how we were living. And I think actually because of that, people are open to a new way of being in a way that we haven't seen in our lifetime. So I think those opportunities are there in all industries to drive meaningful change. And for me, I have sort of those two careers. I still have my law practice and I have Women on Purpose that I'm passionate about. And I'm looking for those opportunities. So for me, in law, I've created programs on a better way to practice law, inviting law firms and lawyers to do things differently, to practice with purpose, get away from that traditional competitive model and look for better solutions for everybody rather than that win-lose. On my Women on Purpose, my focus is, I'm on this mission all about driving change to reframe, because all of life is a negotiation. So inviting both men and women to step into the power of the feminine as a way to do that. So I think for everybody out there, find something that you're passionate about, raise your awareness about the issues, lead by example, share, know that empowered women empower women. So, now is the rise of the feminine. So own it. Don't distance yourself from it. Speak up, speak out. Ask for what you want. Ask. Make a point of seeking to empower others, collaborate, and generate ally groups across all areas of your life and bring a new way of being to the table rather than the same old. That would be my top keys about how to drive that change in a positive way.
Beautiful. And Louise, are we ready to bring it home?
I can expand on that. I think Cindy really nailed it with her last point, though. However, if I just pick out something similar to what Cindy was sharing, and I'll just focus just in on one thing. And I think it's really about identifying your own purpose. Because I think when we can connect to our purpose, we show up with fire. We show up with such a care, a fire. It brings meaning to our work. And that really is what, that's an energy and a force which really causes change. It creates momentum. It causes people to listen. It allows you to continue to show up with confidence despite feeling the fear. And so while I would love a lot of people to care about the same issues that I care about, I really care most about people identifying that passion. And if they don't know what their passion is, just to continue to follow their curiosity. Following your curiosity will get you there. And you might find then your purpose quite early in one's life. It might be later, but following your curiosity and connecting and collaborating with others in a compassionate way, lots of C's there, I think will really cause great change and continue to support our world in a really fruitful, positive way.
Well, I would like to say thank you to each and every one of you for being so transparent and authentic. And, that is how I believe we're going to drive the change, and is that we continue to doing exactly this, having those conversations. And you never know who's going to be listening or who needs to hear it at that time. And I have to say that, even as leaders, we change, we evolve, and I don't think that we will stop evolving. So that continuous journey of listening and learning and just lifting others up is how we're going to really drive that change. So thank you so much, ladies. Again, congratulations on the book. So Women Are Driving Change. It's been a pleasure, and I'm really excited about the journey ahead and the impact that we can make together.
I love that.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Great to share the stage with all of you powerhouses.
Feeling is the same.